Hello and welcome to a new edition of this chat between me and Prad. Welcome to the show again.
Sure.
So, are you ready to have this discussion now?
Yeah. What's been happening since the last time we spoke? So a lot to discuss. Yeah?
So, we're picking up some topics. So, the first one I'm going to talk about is the Arrows project, and this is on the back of the performance that the Indian teams have had in the SAF Under 20 and performance based on the fact that what's happening in the next 10 Cup. It's really showed where we are, didn't we? And this Arrows project 23, 24, 25 kids is what we are focusing on. It felt like a stupid move when it started. It probably cemented right now. What is your take on it?
What's that definition of insanity? It's like doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. I mean, that's pretty much seems what the Arrows project seems like. They got success in a way. It's the same like TFA, right? You got success because at the time there's nothing else around for youth to play, so everyone played in the first batch of Arrows instead of sitting on the bench at I League clubs because there was no youth system, and it looked successful. But then over time, if you're going to take just a select group of players and keep the same group of players training all year round, it just doesn't make sense. First, it's not an incentive for any clubs to start their youth development. I remember the first batch with JJ and Dika, I think, came over from Pune FC and other clubs provided their youth players. So you're weakening those club teams, and then you're taking away that incentive for them as well to develop their own players. So I think the argument was made way back then, 10 years ago, saying if you take 30, they used to take about 30 in the Arrows project, and train them for a year. Only 11 get to start, 3 subs, maximum 14 players are getting game time. And you know how it is with a club team over the course of the season. Maybe 18 players get minutes, substantial minutes. So you got 12 players who are basically doing the same thing, just training and not playing. And so if you're the national team coach of that particular age group, yeah, granted you get to work with those players for longer, but you're only looking at a small pool of players. Whereas if each team in the I League in those days, 14 teams had a developmental team, and each of them would obviously have at least 20, if not 30, in their squad. So even if you just say 25, you're looking at 250 to possibly 300, 400 players in India in that age group. And then on any given week, you should have 150 getting minutes as opposed to just 11. So it just multiplies much better, and it's there's definitely enough kids who want to play, and you just have to create competitions. Cost wise, I get that argument, and you could do it regionally, which will keep your costs down. But as you've seen and we've seen over the years, the way the costs have spiraled with the Arrows project, you could easily do a more cost effective and pan India and cater to a lot more players. And look, Mizoram's done it. They have age group league, not tournament, league. I think Karnataka Football Association is starting to do it. Goa's always had it. They've always had that under 20 league. So it is possible to do it. It just needs the right people pushing it in the right direction.
Yeah, it just seems like a very narrow-minded view that they have taken it. And which national federation actually runs and then sells
No,
the players?
no, that part, that's the biggest joke about it. It's like you're a national federation and you take players from club teams and then claim that they're yours and say we develop them, and you want to play in the league, and then you don't let them go and play for their clubs, and then you try and actually sell them afterwards, which is just even more ridiculous. I mean, the fact that you can take them away from a club, so especially now with this training compensation coming in. So if you're a club and you loan your player to the Arrows project, he plays for the Arrows, and then let's say an ISL team or some other team comes in for them, you don't get that year as training compensation because they weren't with you. They were with the Arrows team. So it just beggars belief. I mean, the daftness of it, and in a way, it goes against FIFA rules as well. Like it's a tournament, you can take up players. Like SAF Cup now, yes, clubs can have to give up their players for the national team's performance, but to give your players up for the entire year, where they're your players and they're just training either in Bhubaneswar or Goa or wherever these teams are based, and not playing games makes absolutely no sense. When they could have their local games and in addition have those games. So this whole take national teams and sequester them away for a while in different cities. It's just a hugely flawed concept, but it obviously benefits a few. The people who are going on these tours to Vanuatu or play a team that wears Italian jerseys and all that kind of stuff. It benefits them, but it doesn't benefit Indian football. And the results were there, and we know about it. And yesterday was just another reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. One last thing I wanted to talk about was why are we always constantly surprised that Bangladesh is actually improving as a football team, and perhaps we are not actually doing that, and they are slowly, closing the gap, and our first team is finding it harder to beat them as easily as they used to. They drew at home, and now the under 20 is beating them. So at home again. So you know, stand still and you get overtaken, right?
Yeah, I think. Look, I haven't really followed Bangladesh football as much, but I mean, just from what you've seen in terms of some of the clubs are investing quite heavily. Their leagues is reasonably competitive, and they give a fair fight in the AFC Cup. Their club teams, and SAF Cup, their senior team is reasonable. So there is some investment in their youth development over there, but you listen to the pre-match comments of the coach. We should be dominating in SAF, etc., etc. I don't know why they think we should be dominating. It's never as if we've gone and then blown away teams 4-0 in every game and then won the SAF Cup. It's always been relatively competitive at this age group and even at the older age group, at the full national team. I think goes back to the same point. Once you're in the Arrows team, there's no competition for places. You're selected for the final squad of it. Whereas if you had, when prior to that Next Gen Cup and all these teams were playing in Goa, there was competition amongst the ISL club teams. But if we had a competition where ISL, I-League, under-20 teams are all competing, and then the coach is picking the best players from there. A, you're picking players on form. B, nobody's place is for granted. You're taking the best players, you're cherry picking from the current crop of under-20 from all these teams who are doing well and putting together a team. And that's what national team coaches do. It's not take your team, trying to make it into a club team and then say, all right, we'll keep them for a long time and that'll help our results. And I think that's another thing with the players. When you wear your national team jersey, there should be a pride about wearing it, right? It's the day you put it on, it's like, oh wow, I'm representing the country. You put in a performance. That happens everywhere in the world. Here, you're wearing that and playing for week in, week out. You wear it every week when you're playing in the league. So it just devalues the whole thing. And I've seen it with players come back with a chip on their shoulder because they think, oh, I'm an Arrows player. I'm like, you're not a professional player. You're playing in a team that's made up to play in a league, and you haven't, got there on merit. You're not playing in the I-League on merit. You're on a quota system. So these players just, and that's why I think there's a huge gap between the first batches of the Arrows players and now the quality, and they're just nowhere near that level.
Yes. Now, moving on to the next topic, right? The return of English coaches to India. Now we have Simon Grayson, Constantine was announced the other day, Eddie Boothroyd, and Des Buckingham, who I always forget is English for some reason, although there is no legitimate reason why. So we have the Spanish invasion was there for a long time. Why is there a shift? Can you see any pattern in this?
It's one simple answer: Owen Coyle. I think it's as simple as that. Owen Coyle won the league with Jamshedpur, and immediately probably there's owners thinking, right, that's the way that suits our Indian players better, and whatever, the usual myopic thinking is that's the way to go.
He's Scottish.
Yeah,
So
but
they got it wrong.
Yeah. No, British. I mean, you represented Ireland as well, so let's just go with British Isles, UK.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, look, I think when you're a club team, you should be recruiting your coaches on merit, not on nationality. That shouldn't even be a criteria of that. The only thing I'd say and positive about that is language. Obviously, they can communicate better with the players than possibly some of the Spanish that we've had in the past. That said, I mean, I think if you look at the current crop of Spanish coaches in the league, the likes of Peña, Ferrando, they're all Gambao, and Manolo. Manolo's excellent. I mean, I think the way he communicates both with his players and externally with, whether it's media, whether it's management, etc. I think that's a big factor because it's difficult when, as management or with clubs, you can't have that relationship with the coach. Or similarly, if players can't go and approach the coach because there's a language barrier. I don't, and if you look at it this year, I don't think any of the coaches will have that problem. Looking at the interaction which the Chennai coach had, haven't heard much from the Northeast coach, but obviously Ivan was there last year and that's no problem. So I think that communication is a huge factor. So if that's the rationale behind it, then that's fine. But it's more than likely the English coach or British coach won last year. Therefore, let's go with that. Because a few years ago, when Spanish coaches won, there was an invasion of the Spanish, and I think the other reason also could be that when the Spanish coaches came in, they brought in a lot of Spanish players, and that's actually bumped up the price. So there's a huge inflation in that Spanish player market. So maybe to try and diversify and get talent from different parts, that could be one of the reasons as well.
So I think this could be a controversial opinion. I think there is a lot of talk about Constantine coming back and how that's going to be a great thing for Indian football because he knows Indian football. But I honestly think he'll have a big challenge, not just because East Bengal is run a little bit haywire, but also because he can't pick and choose the best Indian players. Yes, he can get the foreign players in, but it's you can't be a defensive-minded coach because more or less most teams are level here. So there's
Okay,
going to be a lot of questions. Like, this is
I've got
this
a
is my
question.
opinion. Like, you can change.
Well, I've got a question for you. When he was
Yeah.
national team coach, did he pick the best Indian players?
No, he didn't. But for most part, he did.
No.
The only player he didn't pick, which I thought deserved at that time, was Togisim Hoikit because he was scoring the goals for Pune. And it ended up with us having a fight at a press conference. Not a fight, like a argument of sorts, where he said he's not tall. And I think Hoikit was 6 feet tall. So, yeah, he maybe didn't pick the best players on form.
No, if you look at when he was in charge of the national team, he got a lot of criticism for not picking players who were on form or fan favorite players. He picked players that he felt were fit in his system. Like he picked the Bikash Jairus, he picked the Halicharans, he picked the etc. Of the day, who a lot of fans would possibly not have picked, and it was players that suited the way he played. So the argument there could be that he knows how to get the best out of limited resources, and he's not necessarily one that wants those kind of flair players. And I think if you look at as a club, one of the biggest problems East Bengal had in the last couple of seasons, defensively, they were quite poor. And if he can fix that problem and he recruits good foreigners, he might actually, they might not be the sort of standard sort of, all right, wooden spoon contenders. And I'm curious to see, I'm actually interested to see because people have labeled him as a certain type of coach because with the national team he played a certain way. Now with the club team, how it'll be different, how he chooses to play, because league games are different than, when you're playing not to lose to try and keep ranking points or to keep that record, etc. But let's not forget, it's the same guy, same coach who 4-1 against Thailand, playing somebody like Ashik Kuranyan up front as a number 9. You'd rather see some bold decisions like that with him using players and knowing how to use Indian players and get the best out of them than maybe seeing Ashik as left back, which some other coaches have done. So give him credit. I mean, until halfway through the season, I would judge, but I actually think he'll do well, and he'll probably be the second best coach that East Bengal have had in the last 5 years.
Who's the first best?
We'll see at the end of the season if I'm right or not.
But I do think that he will be decent. But I think living up to the performance that he delivered at the national team level could be a problem because that's the person that you'll always compare him with. This is the guy, and then if he doesn't do well, you're suddenly like he can't do well despite having all the foreigners in the team. He could pick this blah 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 blah. All that narrative will come. And look, Kolkata clubs, it's very difficult to sustain if you're not winning, as we've seen the last 2 years, especially.
Yeah, and I think this year with the crowds being back, that's a huge factor. You've got, I mean, the opening game in the Durand Cup, which I don't think he's taking that game. That's going to be, that's going to be against ATK Mohun Bagan, and then you've got the league games, and hopefully they don't schedule the derby so soon, because in the last couple of years they've had the derby too soon for a team that's recently formed. I think it's a little bit because Bagan will obviously be playing AFC Cup, Durand Cup, all these kind of things. So they'll be quite, they'll hit the ground running by the time the league starts. So I think it'd be fairer if it's a bit more uh, spread out in terms of the derby isn't within the first month, ideally. But let's see, scheduling is a whole separate thing. So,
Yeah, I agree. Derby should be a little more in so that there is some meaning, much more meaning than what it
absolutely.
should be. Yeah.
Especially with the crowds and everything like that, like it'll be huge this year. That'll
Yeah.
be
The proper derby one time. So,
proper. Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about the second division. Brad, I know you are very closely associated with it. So, it's not really a division now, is it?
No, that's what it's a bit of a confusing one at the moment because teams that have won their local competition, like obviously Dempos have won the Goa Pro League, FCBU has won the Bangalore Super Division. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Peerless won the Kolkata League. Oh, it was Mohammedan last year. Oh. But those are the teams that are eligible to play in the second division. So you start the second division as all winners of thing. These are teams that have probably won 18 game leagues to get to the title. Some states it's probably just finished in a week. You have 4 games, you finish and you won your state league.
That's how Rajasthan won, right? I think 7 games in
Right.
11 days or something.
Something like that. And your Himachal one is similar and all these ones are similar like that. So then you compete in the second division and now they're talking about saying it's going to be home and away, it's going to be a proper second division, it's a league. Now, hope so. And what happens if then, let's say, the Kolkata team qualifies, and then the Bengaluru and the Goan team miss out by a point. And there's also talk that second division, so ISL team, reserve teams might be in it as well. You miss out by a point. And then because you're focused on your second division campaign, you play a weakened team in your local league, or you just don't happen to win your local league again. You miss out narrowly. So let's say a Salgaoka wins it in Goa, or a Sporting Goa, or somebody else wins it in Goa. Kickstart in Bangalore wins it. Then what happens the next season? Are all automatically FCBU and Dempos not eligible for second division, and then now Kickstart come in, which doesn't make sense because then you can't build for long term. You can't sign players on multiple year contracts. You can't have a second division campaign saying, all right, we missed out this year, we'll strengthen, build on our weaknesses and go next year. And by the same token, it shouldn't be closed so that, okay, Dempos are in and FCBU is in. Now, Kickstart doesn't have a chance to get in, or Salgaokas can't get in because there's one team from each state coming in. And in some cases, not even the city dictates the whole state, like Mumbai in Maharashtra or Bangalore, for that example, in Karnataka. It shouldn't be that way. If it's a league, and just like how sporting merit comes into it, if these are the teams in the second division, let's say there's 10 teams this year in the second division, if there's sporting merit that another team has done well in their local league and they can sustain it, they should be allowed. And then the second division is a league. So these are the teams that are in that league year in, year out. There's obviously no relegation from the second division, or they might have to be. If you finish bottom 3, let's say, consecutive seasons, then you're not in there anymore. You have to earn your right back in there on some sporting credit to make the games meaningful. But you have to have teams that are in there because if you remember back to the days when second division was very competitive, Royal Windo had 3 attempts, I think, or 4 attempts, and then they got in. Sikkim, it was the same thing, 3 or 4 attempts. Lajong didn't get in on the first attempt. I think a lot of teams, HAL had to fight. Even there was a case, even Dempos, I think, missed out 1 year, and then the next year they got in. So if you want to make the second division a meaningful league, you have to take into consideration that it has to be a league and not this tournament format, because it can't be qualifying tournament. That's because then it's just a lottery, and then clubs can't build for the future.
Why do they call it the league then? Because obviously, very clearly, as you said, over the past few years, it's been a tournament. Like the winner, all of them go play one time. So you sign players for that, especially, and then you don't play the same team in your local leagues most of the time. Especially if the local league doesn't happen at the right time, which is also quite interesting. So a lot of money is also wasted in this whole process, right?
Yeah, and it suits the teams that can put together a team just for their local league. So you put together, as you said, 7 days or 11 days, 4 games, win your local league, continue on, and then play the second division qualifiers, as they call it. Last 2 years, okay, they've got an excuse, COVID, so you have to be in bubbles, etc., etc. But this last year was a farce because the second division qualifying, or for the I League qualifying, finished after the transfer window closed. And then the same team was going to get admitted into the I League that season, but they started before the transfer window had opened. So Rajasthan played the first game with seven players because they didn't have players registered. So it's a farce. So you have to have a proper season for the second division that starts. Let people know when it's going to start because the transfer window is going to close in about a month's time.
Yeah.
If you just suddenly announce it in November, what are people going to do? They're going to say, "Oh, okay, we can only sign free agents." So it kind of weakens the whole structure of the league. You can't loan players from other teams that may not be getting games in the ISL or I League. Or everyone will then say, "Please, can we delay it till January because we haven't got players." So you delay it till January, then it becomes at very best a 5-month league. But you can delay it for one season, saying, okay, this year, but next year you should clearly state next year we're going to start on whatever it is, whether it's July, whether it's September, whether it's some, clearly state when you're going to start the next league so people can sign players on longer term contracts. It's great for players to have that stability. It's not great for players to be like, oh, you're given a contract which states till the last day of the league. And then if the league is 1 month, they only get paid a month. That's not right on players either. So
Yeah, it is a pretty hodgepodge, let's say, version of running that league. Let's hopefully we'll hear more about the COA thing later. So hopefully something will come out of it, and we'll have a calendar which we
that's
can.
today, right?
That's
That's
today,
today
yeah.
the announcement.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
What do you expect?
I think they might just shove it down people's throat with obviously some changes that FIFA has suggested or AFC has suggested. But yeah, I think they will shove it down the whole thing, and fair enough, whatever works. But yeah, we had a long discussion with Ranjit Bajaj about this, cross questioning him. So let's see what comes out of it. So I'm just going to throw this. We hadn't discussed this, but I'm just going to throw this because it just popped
Okay.
in my head out of the left field. Yesterday, I was seeing this thing in on Twitter. There was a clip that said one of the foreign commentators, whoever that was in the Next 10 Cup, told that Kerala Blasters is the biggest club in the country. And a lot of people are talking about it. I think they lost 7-0 or something. I do not, yeah. But whatever, that's irrelevant. I mean, we discussed that in the first question. But nevertheless, it brings me back to the question: like, what do you think is the biggest team in the country? And it's your opinion, right? It's not like a, and I'll say my opinion as well. So that if we get abused, we are both abused.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. It depends what metric, obviously. Like, look, when you say big clubs in India, the first ones that pop to mind are the Kolkata Giants,
Yeah.
right? Those three clubs are your big clubs because of the history and legacy. That's one way of looking at what they've achieved. And you start racking up their trophies, and obviously they win that argument. If you use the modern day parlance of which are the big clubs, then obviously, your City Group teams and, I think Bagan at the moment are the big spenders. They can get the biggest players. If you look at as an Indian youngster, where are the big money players going? It's like whether it's Apuya last season to Mumbai or Ashik now and other Ashish Rai going to Bagan. So that's where the money is. Now, something that I'm not a big fan of, but this whole social media side of it, but you have a social media battle, there's only one club that's going to win it, and that's Kerala Blasters. And so by that rationale, yeah, they're the biggest club in India because you disagree, who are you going to get trolled the most by? Probably like fans from that club. So it's the age-old argument that everyone wants to argue about my club is better than your club. By what rationale do you use it? I mean, BFC fans will say, whatever, 5-5, or in the last 5 years they've been the most successful in Indian football, both on domestic, continental stage. So everyone's got their own yardstick that they'll choose to measure themselves by. And maybe that commentator's just clever and positioning himself for a commentary role in the ISL. So could be that, mate. You never know nowadays. It's just we think it's just a flippant remark, but it could be just chuck a little seed in there. Let's see if it grows. And
Yeah, absolutely.
that's the way social media seems to be at the moment nowadays. And perfect if you get 100 likes and one that tweet someone put up saying, "Oh, he mentioned it's a Premier League commentator." It's not like it's a Premier League commentator. Some guy commentating on a game that's happening at a youth training ground, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's great. Yeah, look, if it makes you feel better that you're the biggest club in India, great. But it takes away from the fact, and it's a good way to hide the fact that you got pumped 7-0. and they took their foot off the pedal. Spurs, and that's
They
Spurs
were
under
doing
18.
rainbows. Those
Yeah,
kids were doing rainbows. Like imagine if you would see that in our field, we push that guy and say, "Shut the fuck up and don't do this anymore."
yeah. No, and it was just because it was too easy for them. I mean, but that's what I mean. What's what? Hopefully, the takeaway from that is you realize like 16 and 17-year-old players in those countries are significantly better, and but we just have to deep down and go why, and it comes down to the age-old thing. They play more games. They have more
Yeah,
games. Unfortunately, these lads they played a little tournament that happened in Goa for a month, and then just been training a little bit and expecting to compete against players who play 40 games a season at the very very least.
yeah, for 5 6 years.
Yeah, exactly. Or longer. I
Yeah.
mean, those boys who scored those goals, the guy was played the most minutes in under 16 last year. He was one of their best players in 2021.
Hmm.
So they've been doing that since the age of 8. So you're looking at close to 10 years where 40 games, they've played over 500 games in their lives, proper, meaningful
Competition.
games.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's not a like for like comparison. See, that 5 year difference doesn't make a difference. That's why it comes back to that same old thing with the Arrows project and all that. Like you can age cheat and get success at under 16 level, and
Hmm.
you wonder why at under 16 our teams do well in SAF or other competitions, and then under 20 we don't, because that age makes no difference once you're at you saw under
Yeah.
18 boys yesterday from in the next gen cup who are bigger, stronger than these players who are older. So it that levels out. So that advantage you gain is so short and so pointless that
Hmm.
we have to start fixing that. So that's the bigger issue to be addressing rather than my club is bigger than your club kind of thing.
So I wrote an article on age fraud recently, so everybody can go check it out on my Twitter feed. But there's some funny stories of brothers and all going and doing the TW3 test to show the rest of a 13-year-old. The younger brother goes and does it.
Now, look, the bigger issue isn't the players. I think it's the coaches because
Yeah, yeah.
the people who enable it are the ones who need to be taken into task, and we're not. And I haven't seen a single coach get done for it until you start banning coaches. We talk about it on coach education courses, but everyone just nods their head and agrees. And you've got guys on your coaching course who are ex-players who've all done it themselves,
Hmm.
and will criticize others, but won't put their hand up and say, "Yeah, my coaches did this to me as well." I mean, how many ex-players have come and spoken up and said, my coaches at this academy did that, or my coach at that academy did that. There's guys in the national team setup who are coaching the next generation, who themselves have changed their age or changed their name to. They couldn't change the birth certificate, so you get your younger brother's birth certificate,
Yeah.
right? And now they're in charge of national team programs, or assistant coaches or head coaches of national teams, and they're not putting their hand up saying, at least put your hand up and say, listen, it was wrong in those days. That's what we did, and we shouldn't do it. But that's where it comes down to the accountability, and if you don't clamp down on it with the coaches, it's never going to stop
Yeah,
because
I
it's not
think
the player
even my
fault.
dad is technically 1 year younger than he actually is in terms of records. But that's just random because his father forgot what his age was when they put him in school. So he said, ah, he's this thing. But yeah, again, he never played anything at any level, so that's okay. But yeah, coming back to this biggest club thing, in my last 5 minutes, I've thought really hard about this. And I think at this moment in time, I would probably say Mohan Bagan. I know it's difficult to say because the ATK combination and people are unhappy, blah blah blah. But they are winning titles. They have the history to back it up. In the last 10 years, probably BFC and Bagan are the two. BFC probably is the number one, but Bagan was the number two. So and right now they look like a better team. They have the fan base. They have the trophies. They have the history. I think that's who I go with.
Yeah, and I think for me, if you look at national team players, right, which team, if you look at the likes of Liston there, Manveer, Ashik, now Ashish Rai, Amrinder's there. I think Vishal Kate's just joined. You've got players, it's stacked with national team level players. And so if you're a young player coming up, it's almost like you're aspiring, I want to play there because you want to play with the best players and compete against them. So, and some of the best foreign players in the league are also playing over there. So definitely from that perspective and all that, I think they have to be up there. And look, the truth again is now this year crowds are back. I think their games will be absolutely packed and sold out if they do everything the right way and make sure that they look after their fans. I think Bagan will just be the team that everyone will be looking and watching out for this season.
Yes. So that's my stamp. Okay. So that's who I think it is. So anyway, I think this is the end of the discussion we have. We'll have a few more controversial topics or discussions where we can sort of butt heads a little bit going forward. Hopefully, we'll have more things when things start happening, like the
Yep.
Duran Cup or something starts happening. So
Sure.
thank you.
Maybe
Thanks.
maybe we'll get some others. Maybe get Ranjit or Orca on or something, or
Yeah,
Richard on, butt heads a little bit more.
absolutely. Yeah, but Richard is difficult to butt heads to. He's a very affable guy. But Orko definitely we can butt heads.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
All right, mate. Thanks, Sandeep.
thank you.
Okay, see you.
Yeah.
Hey, I've got a